Welcome to the Pure Property Podcast. Whether you are considering buying your first investment property or reaching property mogul status, we dissect the fundamentals through to large-scale property development and everything in between.
G'day, how you going? Phil Tarrant, co-host of the Pure Property Podcast. And I listen to that introduction and I go, what are we going to talk about today? There's a lot of words there, Paul Glossop, my co-host. What do they all mean?
It's not that complicated, is it?
Really? I don't know.
The Pure Property Podcast with Paul Glossop.
The Pure Property Podcast. And I look at the sign here, it talks about
there is.
research, education and results.
That's what we're here for.
Isn't education before research?
Well, it depends on who's doing the research and who's doing the education.
Yeah.
Yes. We research the property, educate our clients to deliver results.
Is that the way it works?
That's typically the order.
So here's the question for you. Sounds like a pub thing. Two Irishmen walk into a pub. Do you research first or do you educate them? What's the trick to educating Irishmen?
I think you have to first seek to understand the language barrier.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's usually where I started with any Irish people, but particularly the Irish brothers. That was usually the hardest part,
Irish
to make sure I
brothers.
wasn't talking too quick, but most importantly, they weren't talking
So you had to
too
slow
fast.
down talking
So
quite.
everyone needed to slow down.
We're not as bad as most, to be fair. Come on.
We're still in a job here. So.
If we'd met over a pint, maybe.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny how these things happen. And introducing our two guests, Will Magee and Michael Magee, the brothers Grimm from sunny Ireland, the home of the potato. I'm actually getting to the potato business, by the way, gents.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'm selling potato subscriptions.
Getting back to your roots.
I am getting literally back to my roots. I've got some test potatoes underway right now. I'm trying to work out what particular brand. And I know I am stereotyping here, and no doubt I'm going to get a lot more hate mail across the airwaves than is the Pure Property Podcast. I wouldn't do this on the Smart Property Investment Show.
No, of course not.
I do it on a podcast which Paul Glossop is responsible and liable for. How you guys going?
Yeah, going well.
Yeah, all right. Well, not too
Well,
bad.
thanks for having us on the show.
No, welcome. Well, so for context, I know Michael and Will pretty well. We work together. They're colleagues of mine. Worked together for, nearing a decade.
Yeah, decade.
That's a bit depressing,
Nearly
isn't it?
11 years for me, Phil.
It's 11 years.
Yeah, I think it's actually 10 years yesterday for me.
For you. See,
Yeah.
look how well I remember these things.
Yeah, there you go.
Congratulations. Yeah. You're stuck now.
No, getting rid of us.
But you're, like most people that work at Momentum, are property investors. It's a bit of a prerequisite now to building a career at this business that you invest in property. You guys are property investors.
We were hoping to have 5 within 5 years. We've got 4 in 5 years, which isn't too bad. First property we got was in 2018 in Kalanga in Brizzy.
Okay.
Picked that up for 365. It's now valued at 620.
It's pretty good.
Yeah, not bad. Thank you, Paul.
I'd say 620 be pretty cheap
Very
too.
conservative.
I reckon you- I
This
reckon
is
you like
REA's
that.
numbers, whether you believe them or not.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then a couple of years, I mean, we were thinking, it's going to be a property a year at the start, but obviously it doesn't always work out that way. It took us 3 years then to pick up our second property, which we got in High Wycombe, in Perth. Picked it up for 420, now 587 it's valued at, which is pretty cool. A couple more years until the next property, which is Perth again, Balga, which is a pretty interesting property. It's a big old plot, designated to be subdivided into a triplex, which is pretty cool. So option to develop down the line there at some stage. So got that for 510 a few months ago. Now according to REA 547, not too bad. And then picked up a house in the Goldie a couple of months ago, a townhouse for 620, and now valued at 641. So everything going in the right direction. And yeah, we're looking at picking up a couple more this year in SMSF structures. So that's how we're looking.
But they'll be separate. Like we were thinking about doing them together, and we're like, no, these ones we'll keep them separate because it's obviously for our pension.
Yep.
But,
Your pension.
yeah.
You don't call them pensions here.
Whatever, Phil. It means the same thing to me. I don't care.
I agree.
But there's the interesting part about I think talking about the journey from the start, the benefits of us doing this together. With Paul's guidance was obviously it's very hard to get a deposit together. So you're splitting that effort in half really. So we'd a set amount that ccame out of our wages each month, and it wasn't a huge amount, but that just kind of trickled away every month, and then it actually slowly built up to what we needed then to, we had a pre-discussion with Paul. I think it was about 5 months out before we were buyer, and you told us, gave us some guidance on even just our cash flow responsibilities and, the tools and tips around that.
Yeah.
That was really helpful. But we have the time to get that deposit together.
Yeah.
So we have the time for our efforts to get capital growth, which we've realised as well. So that's one of the major benefits. The other things are kind of accountability. Like, it's easy to say, I'm going to put this away and not, go to PJ O'Brien's and have a big Friday, Saturday night, So you've got another person that you've committed to doing this together with. So two big drivers at the start of the journey. And then I suppose when going along the journey as well, it's costs. You got costs. You pick up the repairs if needed. It's like the two of us can half those costs as well. So
have you been faithful to the contribution? Like, did you ever dip in and go, I just need a few bucks to get something fixed?
Well, we all know I'm the Boulder brother, Phil. So I think you know the answer to that question.
So,
but and it's when it got to the point where it started becoming more of a self-perpetuating thing because of the capital and the assets that we could extract. I suppose we stopped putting in as much money as we probably should be. So we'd probably be further along now. But yeah, we're just benefiting from time in market at the moment, which is cool. So we do put some money in, but probably not nearly as much as we were at the beginning.
So you're going to be sort of in 10 years' time going, we should have done, we could have gone so much harder back there in 2024.
But if we have 10 houses in 10 years, I'm still not going to be too annoyed at myself.
To be completely honest, though, I had a wedding, 2 weddings, so same person, but 2 weddings.
It's complicated.
It's the Irish wedding. It's the Irish way.
Well, we one in Ireland and then one here, 2 big weddings, and they come with their associated costs. And then Will was putting in more then. Now Will's got his wedding, so now I can commit more. So it keeps it fluid. So and it keeps our ambitions to have 10 years, on track.
So those sort of rules of engagement, not the marriage kind, but how you choose to operate together, is it just open, honest, transparent? Just you know the game, you know what's expected, and you hold it. There's no real.
We're very close. We're very close brothers. We came here together. We've worked together. We lived together for years. So but and we trust each other implicitly. So that's their key ingredients to want to get into property investment with someone.
Yeah,
you have to trust. Trust is the primary thing. So because it can be complicated. So. Like, again, all the properties are in Will's name currently, like the first 4, because that's what we were advised by our accountants. The next tranche of properties will go into my name. But I trust, if I didn't trust Will and he decided he just wanted to, take full ownership, there is zero I could do about it. So.
Or you could, leave me with 1.9 million in debt.
Stay tuned for episode 4.
So if there's trust in the relationship, the terms become negotiable, right? It's a great Tom Panos saying, but it's true, right?
Yeah.
Like, if there is trust, then, it'd be second guessing people's motives. And it comes back to the point, things change, like things change. So, and whether it's you guys buying together or other, but I have a shared portfolio with a good friend that you guys know of mine, Alex, and it's just easy. It's just is. They're really good assets.
Yeah.
And you can always offload stuff if you need to, but that's not why you're investing in property. It's a long term play. But that's a good question. Why are you investing in Australian property?
Wealth creation.
Yeah.
I mean,
For the purpose of wealth creation.
Do you want me to say we're going to retire early?
I don't know.
Well, we're out of here, Phil.
Thanks, Paul.
Might exit the podcast now.
Mate, I know your guys' lifestyle. You're not retiring. You're not retiring for real estate at any point soon.
But the funny thing is, when we came from Ireland, the tail end of GFC, our very open economy, very, very badly hit. Like Australia, it's just incomparable to how badly hit, Ireland was. Property, our family business was all wrapped into property. There was like a retail business, and that all went down the drain because it was all tied into property. So we were very, very hesitant about committing to property. But again, Paul, like tying back to you, that you weren't promoting that this is a really good idea. You gave us a very balanced, unbiased opinion about if you do get into it, this is what you got to be cognizant of. Which then, because we did take our time to there was a bit of a nurturing thing and kind of trusting. But we were looking around, did our own research. Fortunately, we're in a media environment where we've access to good resources and news and people. And over time, through a bit of self-education and, and through experts like, you guys, we obviously came to the informed decision that we're ready to pull the trigger here. And luckily we did. So going on 6 years later, in a pretty good position.
And that's probably one thing that I take away from working with you both in the property space is that when you work with a lot of people, you find that there's a bell curve of people and how they make their decisions. And some people, you have one conversation and they're the shouldas, then there's the wouldas, then there's the couldas. But you probably found yourselves really right thick in the meaty part of that bell curve, where you take information, you consider it, you might go off, talk about it, talk to some other people about it, try to get a few different opinions. Most importantly, talk between each other and say, are we prepared to do this? Is now the right time? And every purchase of those four has kind of been the same process. I mean, to what you said earlier, Phil, is that when there's trust in the relationship, the terms become negotiable. There's implied trust with the feedback and the advice as part of it, but it doesn't mean that you're like, okay, sweet, let's get moving today. It's still saying, okay, we're thinking about it. To your point, you might be looking at SMSF purchases. That's thought about, that's discussed briefly, it evolves, and eventually the decision's made. But it's probably usually been somewhere between 2 and 8 months between the first conversation about the next investment to the point of actually getting a search underway, signing a contract, and then reviewing. And it's been quite methodical. One thing I've found about you both is that although you might not give yourself credit for it, you're probably quite thorough. And whether you think you are or not, I think actually the process that I see you go through is actually quite a considered one, because you don't make quick decisions, but you also don't make too sporadic decisions in the property space. And over time, you probably got a little bit more aware of the more implied things about tax, about structures, about the different implications of how to borrow money in partnerships, in trusts, in SMSFs. And now you can kind of be a little bit more linear to say, we can make that decision. We know what to do there. We don't need that information anymore. We need to know about this. Why are we doing this? How does it fit into that? Now we've got significant others that in your lives, they'll obviously be part of those future conversations as well, which is probably the evolution as to where it goes from here. Is that the SMSF side, probably not so much, but if there's any more joint purchases, that's when that conversation might evolve again, which hasn't necessarily happened yet.
Yeah, but it will continue.
Yeah, absolutely.
And again, I'm married, but we're very open. With our partners that we're going to continue on this journey. It's benefited us up to now, so we're happy.
So they like property, or they like the idea that you're trying to make some money through property.
Yeah, a bit of column A and B, Phil. So, cool. But again, I can't.
It's a business for us. That's how we treat it, and they're happy to have partners that are, motivated to create more money for our partners.
But that's a good point. It is a business. You need to think of it as a business. You've got to be as attached and disattached with it. If you put an emotion in property, it gets
one thing
messy.
as well is that when you're making a massive decision, financial decision, especially the first one, even the second one, actually every one of the properties we've invested in, is that you get advice. So, but at the end of the day, you're like, you have to make the decision, but you're splitting that decision. You're like, I'm able to bounce it off Will to proof that with Will and go, what do you think? So it feels like there's less risk. Do you know what I mean? So, do you think this is a goer? And he's like, that's a green light for me. So 2 green lights gives you full certainty that that this is
when you have veto power on one side. The collective thought is definitely.
Well, you've built in structurally de-risking strategies by having that, right? Which is, and you've got to be able to comfortably debate something without any sort of bias or agenda, other than we're just trying to make the right decision. Whereas I think what happens that sometimes people aren't able to do that, whether they're investing with other people, where it becomes sort of emotionally, or there's other things around it, or they're not able to disconnect, from a conversation over here to now let's talk about this here without sort of offending or whatever. So it's really healthy, and that comes back to the whole notion of trust, right? If there is that trust that you can actually debate something. Have you vetoed properties, or you always go?
Oh yeah, we haven't picked everyone that's been sent our way. So
and
when he calls I've got something for you, and that's
if we're going to be for full transparency, there are people like Paul and within your team that we would trust more than others. And yourself, we need to speak to you if there's if we're really keen on
and there's
something.
connections between certain people, and like everything. Yeah, absolutely.
And we want to be really excited about any property that we say yes to. So there has to be for us some X factor or whatever it is, which fortunately enough we've had that in each of the properties that we've gotten to date. So yeah, I think we're pretty happy with the ones that we've pulled the trigger.
Well,
on
there's
so
a
far.
great balance across them when you look. They're all kind of unique,
Yeah.
and they, they all have a USP to them.
Yep.
So part of the, so it's, we're very, very fortunate.
How do you work out? Do I know your accountant? Would I know your accountant?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. How do you work out like tax benefits and stuff? Because if everything's sort of
Well,
because how do you share that
question,
if
Phil.
if you know?
That's a great question. So it's
To be
actually,
fair, that's one of the areas that we probably have been semi-messy in up until now, which
It's pretty hard to make it not messy.
Yeah.
If we're honest, though.
yeah. So you know our accountant, but
Yeah.
we engaged him early on in the piece, but he wasn't really the right accountant for us at the start. He better suited to someone with meteor portfolios and a little bit further on. So we used maybe a not so great accountant for a couple of years. Accountants actually, for a couple of years. But now we've come full circle and come back to this good accountant who is setting us straight with everything on the tax front.
But that's quite like you see online and you talk to people and there are all these there aren't really that many benefits, if something's negatively geared and for our situation anyway, when you look at the end of the day, we should get an X amount back at the end of financial year, and it doesn't really happen, does it? Unless we've just got a really
maybe
bad
we've
accountant.
just had really bad accountants, but we haven't really benefited massively. At the
Question
end
on
of
that, is this the first full financial year that you've been with the said first accountant?
We've yet to realise that
Okay.
year, so
It'd actually be quite a handy story to maybe circle back with the accountant and bring
it
him on
would.
here, and maybe you guys do a special with him and yourself, Phil, to maybe just talk about
if it's who I think it is. Yeah, sure.
It would,
Yeah,
yeah.
There's a lot of
It is
smoke and mirrors about this person.
There is.
I'll tell you.
It's very mysterious.
Very uncloaking.
The magician.
stepping out from behind the black curtain.
He's there
Special
right now.
guest,
yeah.
But if I'm honest, knowing your situations from a financial perspective and knowing the properties that you have, I can't see personally how there shouldn't be some pretty significant benefits that sit within the assets themselves. Now, obviously, the only real way that there's not going to be huge benefits is if the properties are positively geared, which knowing where the portfolio is, knowing where the interest rates are, that's not going to be the case. They could be closer to neutral than they are highly negative, but there's ultimately going to be two things. There's going to be depreciation and there's going to be negative gearing based on the income versus the expenditure. That should pretty simply be applied to your taxable incomes, and there should be a portion of that comes back to you. Now, depending on how they've treated it, these other accountants, not necessarily aware of that, but it'd be interesting to see how that works. And then how the split of that
sounds like you're
goes
happy
out.
to look at.
To be fair, our portfolio was relatively neutral up until this financial
interest rate
year,
hikes.
and now we've with interest rates rising plus picking up a property that's really quite heavily negatively geared.
Yeah.
So perhaps this time around we should do a little bit better.
Yeah. And that'll evolve.
Yeah. So in terms of ownership, it's you, and in terms of the debt, it's just you as well.
Correct.
Okay. See, even that, it's and if that's the case, you go down, then you go out and you sort of emulate that with the mirror structure. That I'm not providing any sort of financial advice or even recommendations, but you can functionally end up with two unencumbered, disconnected assets by doing it just through the shared pooling of your deposit capability.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
it's actually not a bad construct if you think of it that way. Because if you're able to buy without having to draw on the serviceability of the other,
Exactly.
Yeah.
I
lots of preservation.
don't mind it. I
Yeah.
don't mind it but you got to be pretty tight and close with someone in order to do that.
Well,
right?
we could put a legal document in place there if we wanted. That's easily done
Yeah.
without having to engage in a trust. Like you could do like a tenants and common. We could. There are so many. There are obviously 4 different types. And we've. Not that I'm going to research it. I'm going to be worried or anything, but I'm just aware of them because we're in this industry, right?
Yeah.
So. I don't see that, and people probably listening are like that's just idiotic. But it's just I know our relationship. We're very, 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 very good friends,
Yeah.
and I trust Will. So
Well, that's what the accountant said at the start. So this accountant, when we engaged him first, he's like, well, how well do you trust each other? We're like, well, obviously, beyond doubt. I'm like, okay, look, just go in one of your names.
Yeah.
That's the path to be on until you run out of borrowing
serviceability,
power.
shift over, and it's so structurally it's quite sound because you've got ways you could extrapolate it or reposition it, right? You know,
And that advice came before serviceability changes as well, you know, a few years ago. So it was very, very sound advice.
So what's the value of the portfolio now?
Well, depending on who you believe,
Paul,
it's anywhere.
Paul's value.
Yeah. Well, REA and Domain have it anywhere between 2.4 and 2.6. I think RP data the last time we got it valued, it was around a little over 2.6.
You never know, right?
Yeah, knowing Kalanga, High Wycombe, Balga, bigger waters only really just settled, so you basically take that on face value of sort of circa mid sixes. But I put it around that sort of touch over 2.6, and I was sort of doing my math on where that first purchase came in. And I think I think back in the day we were talking around it was about a 50 or 60k initial cash in to buy that property, and I was sort of doing my math on cash return. It's well over 1,000% over.
Yeah, it's not bad.
Well, but I mean, and this is where I liked it. And it's not until you get to this a bit further down the line where you actually can assess it all. And you're like, how much did we tip in to get to where we are? Not
crazy.
What's the debt versus what's our serviceability. I mean, ultimately the portfolio is slightly negatively geared. The numbers will probably be quite interesting when you do your tax for this financial year. You'll know then exactly how negatively geared it is. But let's say somewhere in the vicinity of 10 to 20 grand for this financial year after you get the money back. And in that turn, you turned your circa 50, 60k into 600k. I mean, if you were six years back and you had that 50 and you invested it and you sort of said, hey, our share portfolio is worth $500,000 now, you'd
any
I
investor
could write a book on that.
You'd be beating Tesla.
You'd be beating Buffett.
You'd
be beating Buffett,
You'd be
that's
beating a
for
lot.
sure.
What's the debt position now on it?
1.9.
1.9. Okay. So you got about 500 in, 700 in there, yeah?
700 for going on Paul's numbers.
Yeah, okay.
And to hold it, you know, that relatively significant portfolio now at circa 10, 20 grand a year, you know, negative, based on both of your holding abilities, you know, it's whilst it's not an insignificant number, it's a number that you could sit back and say, you know what, at any given point in time in life, we're not going to be stressed about holding $2.5 million in assets because it costs us 20k a year to hold them. And if that grows at a insipid 5% per annum, that's 125 grand a year.
Yeah, we're
Compounding.
getting quite to the exciting part, you know, as well now. So we get the next one, and then I think like it does seem to grow exponentially.
Now it's accelerating, you know, because it was like year one, and then it took 3 years to get to property number 2, then 2 years to get to property number 3, then a year, then 6 months. You know, so we're at a position now, you know, where it's starting to speed up. Should we be able to borrow, which, you know, we should be able to mix name. You know, we should be able to keep going quite well now.
Yeah, because I've got
cool.
like
you've got all this borrowing capacity.
that's
been
which is a
preserved.
massive upside to these partnerships. But anyone that's listening, one bit of advice: that's that time since we first met you, that's flown in, and now we've, you know, as you're saying, you know, you got 1,000%, you know, basically return on what we put in. You know, it's like I remember in year one, like because you haven't made one of these acquisitions before, you're looking after the first 12 months, you're like, why is the needle not move more? You know, you want to, you know, it's like you just wait, you know, and then it's like the real, you know, returns start.
But that was your advice as well. It's like this might not do anything for the next year or two.
Yeah, and that's
you probably bought Kalanga was your first place.
Yeah,
like nothing. It wasn't really doing anything back then.
I
bought some places about the same time up there.
Massive block, great spot where that property is in itself. I think it's 1,000 square metre block from memory. It's it's not that one. No, it's 680, 700. But I mean. When it comes out, I mean, this is the biggest thing I've learned, and you probably know this, Phil, from your portfolio over the decade plus that it's been building, is the hardest part, and it always is for the vast majority of people, the hardest part in property is getting your hands on the cash to then deploy it into a property. And then the hardest part from that point is how do you extrapolate that to get to property number 2? The vast majority of people have to save another deposit for property number 2. And to be honest, the vast majority of people have to save a deposit for usually property number 3 and 4. And it's not until you get to that point, which is kind of where you are now, where if those properties are even semi-decently selected, 5% growth on $2.5 million is a vast difference on 5% growth on $365,000. And then you start to think how much different the equity position is when that portfolio is so much greater. You could get the same amount of returns, but once you've essentially broken the back of it now. From here onwards, it just comes back down to how do you keep preserving serviceability and drag out money, and it's a game of finance as much as anything.
And that's actually what's motivating us to set up an SMSF structure and invest in property, because taking on that debt will allow us to grow so much quicker. So it's the same premise, really.
Absolutely.
Remember the smart property investment portfolio which we built as an example. I think we tipped in, call it 250 grand into that portfolio to get it going, and it ended up being at its peak about 19 maybe 19 properties. I can't remember exactly. But we pulled that money out. So, back to the sort of, cash on cash return, there's no cash in it anymore.
It's self-funded.
It's just completely self-funded. So it's got like an infinite amount of, like, I can't even do the percentage calculation on the return on the initial cash because
you were doing the annual reviews for a period of time there with months, I remember, and you were sort of getting 20, 30, 40% return annually compounded on and you're like, you just can't, there's no point calculating it anymore.
Right? No, so it gets to a point where you just go, okay, that's cool. But you've just got to have the
patience.
The patience, but the strategic pay. But you got to have the comfort. The comfort around things not moving as fast as what you think they might move, but the fact that you can continue to pay the bills. Do you have a steady job? Are you making good dough? And if you're doing that, you can just keep going and going. But you got to see it as a business.
Yeah.
What's your business mistake so far?
In
property?
This one?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't. Well, look, we have got good advice. Like we've been that first property cost us like nothing. We've never had to pay for one repair. The guy, the tenant was a existing tenant went in there.
He's still in it?
Still in it, yeah. So he's paying down her mortgage, but he's...
So you got all these on P&I loans or interest only?
There's a mix. We actually, well, interestingly, we put all of our loans at one of the banks because they gave us a rate that we didn't see in market, which I hadn't heard of before. And actually, because we work in around that industry, Phil, I actually talked to someone in the bank and like, well, yeah, we try to keep our loyal customers happy, so they've kind of put all that, we refinance everything into one bank, so it's got quite a decent market rate at the moment. Yeah.
Biggest mistake? Well, I don't know if biggest mistake. Well, probably biggest mistake. We shouldn't have been such an oversight. But however it happened, when we purchased the Kalanga house, the property manager wasn't linked in with Morton Bay Council. So, they were, but then they moved offices. And so any correspondence that were coming from Morton Bay were going to the old address. So nothing was getting fed through to us. Yeah. So all of these council rates built up for 6 years. And obviously that's something you should be thinking about. But, we didn't think about it. First property, we're learning everything.
Accountants should have spotted that.
Yeah. They should have. That's we had crap accountants in the middle there. But so I got a phone call from ANZ one day. This is when we were with ANZ for a while. Says, yeah, mate, I'm after getting a notice here. Your property's going up for auction in 2 weeks. I was like, sorry, what? He's like, yeah, your property's been listed for auction. The council are seizing it because you haven't paid your rates in 6 years. I'm like, what are you talking about? I haven't gotten any notice at all. So on to the property manager straight away going, what's going on here? Property manager, oh, not our fault. These guys, they haven't, it's up to them to be sending it to us. So it turned, we got stiffed with I think it was a $9,000 bill anyway.
Was that what you owed, essentially? Was that just the back pay?
Well, it was $8,000 plus interest. Plus interest. Yeah. So property manager covered the interest.
Well, that's nice.
That's cool.
Yeah, well,
it is their fault.
Yeah, it's a bit of a, a big miss on their half. So, but yeah, that was a
that is a long time.
That's
so interesting though. Like I didn't actually know that story. I didn't know that that's how you found out via the broker. Well, ANZ essentially saying your property's going for sale without you knowing that. I actually didn't know that was a mechanism that council could take.
Yeah, councils can sell off.
Bank.
Yeah. They can sell off bits
of
your land or the whole thing.
Being in this game for a long time, wasn't aware of that as a mechanism to be able to instigate a purchase through a bank, because it's not through you not paying your debt, but evidently it is essentially to the council.
Well, I think the council as a creditor has preference over the lenders.
So
they get paid first. Yeah.
It's very interesting.
Yeah. So
word to the wise.
Word to the wise. Get a good property manager. Get a good accountant.
Make sure you pay your council rates.
A good accountant, and if you ever watch an accountant do it, they've just got like a boilerplate that says, here's the probably 20 things that are going to be costs for having investment property, and they'll be like, well, where's your rates?
How come you're not paying any rates?
You're not paying any rates, right?
Yeah. And you don't even need to tell us what the rates are. Typically, it's send us your rates bill, and we'll plug it in ourselves, and usually have a team to do that.
No, I thought we were going to get a nice bit of tax back because of that last year. No, nothing.
No, nothing.
Yeah,
It might come back to that conversation with that accountant that you
Yeah.
previously had.
But that's it. If you've got a good accountant, good buyer's agent, and,
Yeah.
then and you're busy. Like we've got,
Everyone's busy.
responsibilities here, and
Yeah.
That's
it's
why you
like,
employ
and
these
it's like
people.
it just. Yeah,
So you wouldn't do it
it's-
by yourselves, like go out there and buy your own places. Don't use a
Well,
buyer's
enough
agent.
time, but like in terms of to put the amount of work in that Paul and his team put in, it's a full-time job.
Oh, it is,
and then
yeah.
and then to guarantee that you're gonna, well, obviously nothing's guaranteed, but to ensure that you're gonna pick a good one, I'm happy to de-risk that by getting someone else to do that for us.
Yeah.
So it's
It's a really good question because, like, when you look at the start and all the support services and the introductions, Paul, you make, because you need a good, the conveyancer, the property and you recommend, these partners based on trial and tested experience yourself. But we kind of know them now in those local areas, so when we think about it, but at this juncture, right, it's really like we are investing in kind of your kind of expertise and the trust that we're taking a huge risk.
Yeah.
And we want you to go, this is the right risk
Yeah.
to take.
You're
Or,
de-risking.
yeah, exactly. So, and investing in that is, it's worth its weight in gold. So.
Yeah, but what about the costs? Do you sit there and just go, do you even try and measure it? I don't know how much it costs to use a buyer's agent.
Heaps.
A lot. But do you sit there and just go, do you actually associate a tangible cost in this, or it's just a cost of doing business? So it's not really a big deal. So a lot of people go, I'm not paying a buyer's agent.
Yeah, but it becomes less of a relative to the equity that we have now and to the value of the portfolio, it becomes less of an encumbrance, if that's a
And
word.
if you think about what our time is worth, like so like you pay our bills, like what I mean. So it's money well spent, So
Well, just it's a time, energy, and effort, but also like last thing you want to be doing is having to go to open houses on a Wednesday night or spend your Saturday going around looking at places.
But we
It's a
don't have
nightmare.
the local area knowledge in these places. We don't have the relationships. We don't have the expertise. We can't see what between the lines. Because we're not in the space actually day to day doing this like Paul and his team are. So that's why we partner with Paul.
So you've just settled in the Gold Coast.
In the Goldie, yeah.
I'm at the Gold Coast for the ARIC conference. I can do a drive-by if you want. And
I actually checked it out. I was up in the Goldie a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, yeah.
Good spot. Where you are?
Yeah. It's really good. Went
Close to
to
the waters.
is it a new joint, old joint?
I don't know. Was it
About
20 years?
20 years?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a townhouse. It's a good spot.
Close to water, small
close to
complex.
water, 3 floors. Yeah.
Yeah.
Checked out the local pub. AC/DC cover band was playing. Yeah.
So it's a 3-story townhouse.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Right.
Big joint.
Just right beside the water.
Yeah.
Was it?
Not on the water, but
Next to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it would make a pretty solid Airbnb should we ever decide to go down that route as well.
That was one of the
But that's
motivating
another potential headache. But
Yeah. But
Again,
it
yes,
was one of
time.
the semi-drivers, as saying it could be potentially a lifestyle / Airbnb property for you, which still looked sound from an investment standpoint. Yield's going to be circa 5%, give or take, from the outset as a permanent rental. It's a large property, plenty of owner-occupier appeal. Basically no supply for that type of asset in that area. They're not going to be building
So
more
you're
of
like
it.
the Gold Coast at the moment?
I wouldn't say the whole place. No chance. No. It's for a lot of it. We actually just settled on another place at Miami for another client who's going to be knocking that down, building a duplex. But it's a tough market. It's been red hot for a good few years, and it's probably evolved. I'd say one thing about the Gold Coast versus where it was. The multiple decades of cycles that have passed since you and I, Phil, probably knew of the Gold Coast in the 80s and 90s.
The White Shoe
the
Brigade.
noughties. Yeah,
sort of the
it was
dodgy,
very boom and bust
Yeah.
mindset of that market. It's a different market now. It's very much a permanent, much more of a less transient culture in that area.
Yeah, Southern Goldie down towards the border. It's very much.
It's become a very different place, and I
Yeah.
think for the rest of our existence, it'll be much more of that. That's where people live. They raise kids. They have a really good lifestyle, and it's still relatively affordable when you compare it to a lot of markets we've got the same size economy and population.
So what's next? When's the next purchase?
well, we're in the process of setting up our
So
the
in your
McGee O'Connor
supplementary
Family
funds.
Trust,
Okay.
and then under that are separate SMSF entities, get that going, and then we'll see how we keep going with these 4, and if there's opportunity to extract equity and go again pretty quickly. Obviously now feels like a pretty good time to buy across the board if you can weather the storm at rates and that. So,
How much equity have you touched in the assets?
Oh, a couple $100,000 now, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it predominantly from Kalanga, or has it been from that as well as High Wycombe?
High Wycombe and Kalanga. So we've dipped into Kalanga twice.
Yep.
And then High Wycombe once. Yeah.
Yeah.
But not much out of High Wycombe. You know? And there wasn't much out of Clanga the first time because we did have savings towards it. So we have, twice, but we still like,
You
the numbers
have
are
a broker,
themselves.
a mortgage broker, or you go direct to the?
Yeah, we have a fantastic broker.
Yeah, okay.
She's a bit of a bulldog.
Yeah, she
Last time we were setting on was it the Kalanga one or sorry, was it the Balga one or the Gold Coast one where she copied in the head of broker to give that guy in NAB to put a rocket under him? Someone wasn't
pulling their weight in the credit team, credit assessment.
What's the broker's name?
Her name's Mary. So,
Okay.
yeah, she's phenomenal. So we've used 4 different brokers, and she is.
So she copied us in.
She's ex-bank. So.
Yeah, she copied us in and the head of broker in NAB to say, I've got the client here looped in, seeing how much of an idiot you are, plus your boss. Get moving.
Last resort.
Yeah.
Whatever it takes sometimes, whatever it takes. That's encouraging. So what about other assets? You're diversified, or you're going all in on property?
No, we've
A little bit of shares.
Crypto.
Bit of crypto.
Yeah, that's just sitting there.
How's that performing?
I just don't know how to extract it.
Don't worry about how it's performing. How do you crystallize any profit?
No, it's all right. Like
your digital wallet.
It's just I don't know. It's just sitting there, and I want to get it out now, but Yeah,
it's a process.
They make it hard.
We had a fair bit more in shares, but we sold down a lot of it. So
Will's made some really smart investments in shares. We bounced it off each other. What do you think? So it's I need to
super low risk
it.
stuff as well. So ETFs and that.
Yeah, Nasdaq stuff.
What are they like as clients? Easy to do business with?
If I was an honest assessment, I'd say you're the correct balance, where it's not, hey, ready to go, I've got a property, sure, I'll buy it, Paul. It's not completely implied trust to say, let's just do it, I trust you. It's, okay, great, let's have a look at it. They come back to us, and if it's a no, for us, I'm always a big fan of no's. As long as a no is backed up with rationale, that's logical. And then from there, it's my job is to rebrief, reset our criteria and go again. And that's kind of been a pretty consistent process with all 4 of those properties. That we had a period of time where we were trying to buy a property in Sydney, and it just didn't eventuate. And it was not through lack of trying. There was a couple of times where we were close, and they've been fantastic as close clients, because Sydney, being based in Sydney, and we're looking in the inner west at a point in time, but we got a couple of properties. They made sure they got to inspections when they were there, because Sydney market is a Sydney market. When you get a property in certain areas, you just got to look and you got to make a decision pretty quick. But it just didn't end up happening. And everyone's realistic in the outcome here. We're kind of saying, hey, look, we're trying to get really good outcomes, but with that comes sometimes you have to drop everything. Other times you just come back and you've told me, saying, Paul, look, we just don't have time, don't have the bandwidth, and that's good feedback for us too, because we're not going to hassle you. But I think they've done the right thing, where consistently thinking about it, consistently thinking about where to and what to next, but haven't made sporadic decisions or left field decisions unnecessarily, which has led to a good starting portfolio, which, to your point, Mick, is you guys are at a point now where the compounding effect from this point onwards will be much more exponential. It's kind of, you've broken the back of a portfolio, and you can't get to this point without being somewhat of a sage investor, because most people just don't go past that first one.
It's funny because you're saying what do we like, and some self-assessment. Just think about that. It's like we're follow members of property investor groups and Facebook, and big cohorts of people engaging. These people are obsessed.
They are.
Yeah, like absolutely,
Completely.
For us, we're quite not neutral towards it, but it's a passive earner for us, and we're just trying to build some wealth in the background, and to do so in the most frictionless way is what we want. We just not impacting our day to day, So, so it's worked well having.
Some people do obsess with it. You look at these property forums and you just go, who's got time?
Exactly. Yeah.
Who actually has time to do this? Like sharing stories and all. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's
some serious anoraks out there. Last time I was on the Smart Property Investment podcast, I actually got a load of people hitting me up.
Really?
Yeah. I ended up catching them with a couple of them for pints as well.
Yeah.
Around the property community. No one invites me out anywhere.
I bet they do.
I wonder why.
Oh, mate, he's forgot his wallet.
Yeah, I was going
again.
to say, my Macarena
Yeah.
just constantly.
Oh yeah, guys, I've got my left wallet home. I'll have that cocktail, thanks.
It's funny you say that about people who do obsess with property. And I can understand the point about checking the portals, checking out the value, calculating your equity. It's a bit of fun sometimes, but if you do it every day, it doesn't change anything. It's not like you essentially your share platform where you can see red light, green light type of situation. But nor do people buy and sell or trade property. And it's quite a funny thing. It's an anomaly because there is such a large amount of people who actually do obsess over property. But the reality is they're only going to buy maybe 1, 2, 3 properties, and they're usually the ones who obsess on it. Once you get to the point of having a larger portfolio,
It becomes a nuisance.
invariably
you just complain about it.
you just forget about it. Like
Yeah.
I personally don't look at my properties that I own once a year, and unless I get an email or a phone call from my property manager, or I sit down and do my tax, or I'm refinancing, they're probably the main reasons I'll look at any property that I own. Earlier in the day, it was a lot different. It was, I'm going to get on that. I'm going to look at the next market. I'm going to consider, is there enough equity? Is that property going up
I think
in
it's an
value?
empowerment thing to Will's earlier point. They consider it as a business, and it depends how you approach business. But for most people, like you guys have pretty engaged and active professional careers, right? You're doing lots of things. It's exciting. You're creating stuff. You like we all do, right? Like for a lot of people, if you're in a humdrum 9 to 5, whatever that is, and you can get involved in property, and you're empowered to be like the CEO.
Yeah.
Like you get to make
First time you've
decisions,
been in
right?
that position,
Yeah, and you go,
potentially,
wow, this is great. I am now actually in charge of making decisions, which is going to help me either win or lose.
Yeah,
And I
it's a
think that's
good
what a lot of
point,
people. Well, what would need to happen for you guys not to use Paul anymore as your buyer's agent and move to another buyer's agent? I've often thought about this because they're really sticky relationships. You know, buyer's agent accountant relationship, right? Like,
Yeah, no, that's a good question.
Yeah.
I haven't really considered it.
Yeah.
I mean, I get text messages all the time, from people going, "Are you still looking to build wealth?" Through property investment, and people hitting you up on LinkedIn, and obviously it hasn't appealed to me to go, "What's your rates or whatever?" Just because it's been pretty set and forget so far.
Tried and tested.
So it's been pretty easy,
Yeah,
but
so-
I don't know. Well, perhaps things will change, but right now there's probably not really a huge amount that would make us go elsewhere. Because I mean, look, if we have 4 what look like winners so far under our belt, you don't stop when you're on a heater, do you? So
Never leave the table. Never leave the table on a heater.
but it's really good, like, and people always come to me going, oh, I feel I can do this. And I go, well, I've got no need to, It's a really, really sticky relationships. And you see people shop around buyers agents, though.
Yeah.
So lots of
Absolutely.
shopping going on.
I get shopped. I wouldn't say all the time, but I've got plenty of clients who have come to me from other buyers agents over time. And typically, if I'm honest, the reasons why they usually, and I've got a few clients even right now who I know have only very recently bought a property through another buyer's agency, and their rationale and their reason was, I just wanted to try someone else, which it's usually because they haven't had time in the market for what they've bought. Because to what you've just said, for what Mick and Will have just said, is that once you've got properties that have performed over time, you can see there's a continuation, there's a reason, there's a rationale, and it's working. At that point in time, I feel like it's like having a good mechanic, having a good GP, if you're getting an outcome that you're like, that's what I pay for, I'm getting it.
Yeah.
I don't go past that. If I wasn't and I was unsure and you're kind of getting different feedback and you're very early in the stage and you kind of think, I don't know if I've made the right decision, I think that's usually when we find we get clients who are shopping around because they're just unsure if they've made the right decision.
It's with any sort of, though, like transaction in a service, it's more of for it to break would have to be more of a push than a pull factor. So someone in your team would have to do something to really irritate us for us to, rather than someone external go, here, we've got a really good offer here.
good point.
So.
and it's also work for us too. I know obviously you put in all the work, but obviously we know
You
everyone
pay
in
the
your
bills, though.
Yeah, I know. we know everyone in your team now, and it took a while for us to understand how to have the best dynamic, in terms of working with everyone over there. You know, and having to rebuild that elsewhere will be a bit of a headache.
Yeah,
it's tough. I would caution our listeners, though, who are tuning into this to be careful. Like most people's best life is on Instagram or Facebook, right? You see these people, these influencers or whoever. You've probably got punters in your life that you know them really well. What their persona on social media is probably very different to their real world story, right? So I would caution a lot of our listeners and viewers that there's been a change in certain cohorts of the buyer's agency or property investment space of recent times, where it's all about look at this, look at this, look at this. It's all like, hey, we bought it under market value, we did this, we did that, with that, and it's a currency that's been created around that. So back to the point around why people might come and have a chat with you. They've probably just done a transaction over here. They go, well, that's not really what I expected or saw based on what I've seen on the social media or whatever it is, right? It takes time for property transactions to actually emerge to what their real benefit is. And if it's the immediacy of, I bought it 20 grand under market value, well, really? You're only going to ever realise that if you sell it. If you sell it straight away, you're going to lose a lot more in that capital in your stamp duty. So it's a moot point.
Yeah.
It's an absolute moot point.
I agree. There's some sort of inherent value up front to maybe justify covering a buyer's agent cost as an example. But longer term, if you fast forward 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years, 10 years, 15 years, when your portfolio is much more mature, if you compare it to what you would have otherwise done and what your decisions would have otherwise been, that's where the value is assessed. And for us, that's our currency these days is our reputation, if I'm completely honest with you. That's where we see as our value. And you can only build a reputation that's positive by being patient, not promising things which you know are just unrealistic, and just being methodical with the process. And when it comes down to it, due diligence, research, education, results is our mantra. And if I'm honest, that's what we focus on. We're not trying to say, hey, we're going to buy this property in 12 months' time, we're going to recycle equity, and we're going to multiply that by 10. And all of a sudden now you're a gazillionaire and you have minimal debt, you can retire from your job that you hate so much, and all these other things that go with it. It just doesn't exist. And to your point, Phil, it's kind of unfortunate that the instantaneous part of what social media does is it can sell that quickly. But once people go through the process, they realise very, very quickly also that that the reality of that, as far as an outcome from property, it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. Yeah. Patience and essentially,
it's like Corinthians. Property is patient. Property is blind. I mean, you've got to get a little bit more familiar with Will now that you're planning your nuptials. One of the classics, one of the greats.
Oh dear.
Yeah. Thanks for coming in, gents.
Cheers,
really good.
Thanks for having us.
Keep at it.
Yeah,
when are you going to bring them back on?
I think
when they're property bazillionaires.
I wouldn't mind a post tax discussion, because probably by the end of the year there might be an SMSF conversation that goes there. But probably more importantly, how does the tax consideration then work when you're buying in a partnership? That's not all just a 50-50 split, and you can't just apply deductions to people. And then how does it move to future purchases? It's going to be a story that'll evolve. It'll be really interesting over the next 5 years, because I wouldn't be surprised if you both have potentially kids, big mortgages on a principal place of residence debt, self-managed
That's what
super
you guys
property.
need. Massive mortgages.
Massive
what
mortgages.
You need.
That's
massive
what an employer
mortgages
wants.
with big repayments.
Yes.
It's like back to the point. One of the reasons why I mentioned we love particularly our sales team and sales leaders to
invest in property.
Great retention tool.
Ulterior motives,
big mortgages.
always.
Bury them in debt.
No, we joke. No, both these guys. But it's good that you're, and this is the point, right? You're using the utility of an effective job and a profession and a career to get the benefits and the value out of that, but you're also on the way through creating wealth. It's tight and trusted, works well. Keep at it, keep doing it. Sure to be okay. That's Will Magee, Michael Magee. Paul, thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me on.
On the Pure Property Podcast with Paul Glossop, research, education and results. Did you work that in the back of like a beer coaster one day when you put your business plan together?
I have to downsell everything that
I do. It works.
What's Momentum's tagline?
Be better informed.
Oh, see? You can't tell me that you've done better than that on the back of a beer coaster.
Be better informed. Well, it's easy, right?
Yeah.
If you say it to anyone, you're informed. You might be less informed.
Yeah.
But you're better informed.
Than what otherwise
you're not the most informed.
You're not the most informed, but you're just better informed. The information might not necessarily
better
be.
Informed
much like this podcast. Everything on this podcast should not be relied upon. Previous returns are no indication of
future returns.
Future performance, whatever it is. But no, thanks for tuning in, Paul. If people want to do anything, what do they got to do?
PurePropertyInvestment.com, 1300 985428. They can shoot us an email. It's inquiry with an E at PurePropertyInvestment.com. Our online booking is the easiest way to get in touch with me. Jump on there, Pure Property Investment, hit inquire now. You can usually jump into my calendar, set up some time to catch up pretty much immediately and start journey. As
And
we did
I'll
6
sort of
years
close
ago with
it.
the
So the relationship you have with these guys, it's pretty organic and pragmatic, and it's
Yeah.
obviously built on respect and trust. But you seem to get on quite well as well. Is that like you've got to get on with your buyer's agent, right?
Absolutely. I mean, not all the conversations we've had have been jovial and having quick and character-filled chats. They can be a little bit more harder and poignant, and there's things that just don't go right, and that is part of property. But we have the hard chats, we have the easy chats, we have the fun chats when you talk about equity, we have the hard chats when you talk about negative cash flow and your council rate's not being paid for 6 years, and all of a sudden someone's selling the property from underneath you. But that is part of what we do. That's day in, day out. I catch up with our existing clients pretty much every single day, and that's usually annually. That's a big part of what I always try to do is actively reach out, saying let's tee up some time, whether we're buying more property or not. That part, that hygiene is super important.
It's cool.
And we get to have to chat over a beer from time to time as well, which is good.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's handy. Pureproperty.com. Go and check it out. It's purepropertyinvestment.com. There you go.
Thank you.
Go and check it out. Thanks for tuning in, everyone, and watching wherever you're tuning in or viewing this. We'll see you again next time. Until then, bye-bye.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you. Guests appearing on this podcast may have a commercial relationship with the companies mentioned.